You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. That is why you are here.
Welcome back to the Code Rad Show. With me today is CJ Hayden, who is a writer, a business coach, and productivity mentor. Today, she's going to talk to us about how to grow your business. CJ, thank you for coming on the Code Rad Show. Nice to see you.
Good to see you too, Jason. Love your intro.
Thank you. I think making little intro video segments like that is my true talent, much more so than interviewing. But here we are. So, so you have published 7 books.
That is correct. The most best known and also best selling is This Baby, Get Clients Now. And the most recent is this one, Overcoming the Fear of Self-Promotion.
Yeah. That's why I have a YouTube channel in hopes of self-promotion. So that's something that's very interesting to me. I'm not as prepared as you are. I should have a copy of my comic book to show on camera to promote. So I think a lot of people watching this video will be very interested in that subject of self-promoting their writing or whatever it is that they do on the side, whatever their true passion is. Would you like to talk about getting over the fear of self-promotion?
Well, we could talk about getting over the fear of self-promotion for sure. We could also talk about the topic that we bounced around, which is the idea of expanding your book or your blog or your class or your game into something bigger. 2 different ways of growing your business. You know, one way is to look at, okay, I got my thing and I'm just going to try and get more clients, more customers, sell more copies, which is pretty much where most of us begin. And for that, definitely overcoming any fear you have about self-promotion is pretty important. The other way of growing is to look at things through an entirely different lens, which is instead of following the normal track of, I need more clients, I need to sell more copies, how can you take this thing bigger? How can you make it sustainable? How can you get out of the ongoing struggle of more clients, more copies, and instead look at leveraging your time, going to a bigger audience, and perhaps one day walking away from it and just collecting the money, which is another way of looking at growing your business. And I would really love to talk with you about that particular thing, getting people out of that day-to-day struggle.
Absolutely. I'm very interested in that subject. So go ahead. I don't have a question. I think you are the expert on this.
Well, you know, it's the place that many of my clients and my readers, they really struggle, is you create a thing and then what you find out is it doesn't provide a sustainable income. And in order to earn more, you got to create another thing or another thing and another thing, or you have to just do the thing over and over again with new clients every time, whatever that thing is. So, you know, might be writing books, might be creating artistic works of some kind. All of that requires you to keep creating new stuff all the time and then spend your money on selling your stuff. Or your thing, it could be a methodology or a system where you have to use it over and over again and find new people to use it with. But just because that's what you see most people do, it doesn't mean that you have to do it that way. So let me tell you my own origin story, to use a familiar superhero metaphor, which will illustrate what I mean. So back in the early 90s, when I became a business coach, I saw one of my colleagues using a tracking worksheet. And it was similar to this one that I'll hold up for you here. Let's put that a little bit closer to the camera, right? So looks like something you could create with a spreadsheet, and it's a tracking worksheet. And I found out a little bit about how she was using that to do life coaching. So you'd get your client to choose a goal or 2 or 3, and then up to 10 regular actions or habits that they wanted to perform in the direction of their goal. And then you'd have them check in every week on their current state of body and mind and on their progress on all those things. So the light bulb that went on for me when I saw her tracking worksheet was to adapt this idea to use with self-employed professionals and creatives who were marketing their business. So I asked my colleague's permission. She said, sure, use it. And I tried it out with a couple of coaching clients after modifying it for my audience. And it turned out to really be a useful structure to help them track their marketing and to help us orient our coaching sessions. So that was really my first level of expansion. I took a worksheet and I turned it into a coaching process. And so the second level of expansion that I applied to it was, I said, well, what if I were to use this with 6 people at once in a group instead of just one person at a time? This is so much easier to use today when we have access to Zoom and all of these video platforms, right? But yeah. Okay, this was the 90s. And so I said, all right, tech doesn't have to be a barrier. How can this be done? And I recruited 6 people. We met in person for a kickoff meeting. And then we moved to telephone conference. So we did this by phone conference using a call, meet me phone bridge. We met twice a week for a month. And it really worked. It produced results. So I named the methodology, I named it Get Clients Now. And it turned out to work really well. I turned my one-on-one coaching process into a group thing. So now I was leveraging my time. And after doing that for about a year, I said, well, what if I allowed other people to use this process with their clients? Mm-hmm. How would that work? So I created a facilitator's kit. I took my worksheet and my other handouts that I'd created for the group thing. And over a weekend, I wrote a facilitator's manual. And I said, let's see if anybody wants to buy this package. And people did. So all of a sudden, I had this facilitator's guide out there that people were buying, and they were delivering Get Clients Now programs to their own people. So rather than just, holding on to this thing and saying, this is mine, I said, could there be possibilities here involving other people? And I took that step. I granted them, think of it as a user's license, kind of like would be on a software package or an app, right? There's terms and conditions that you click yes to without even reading. It had a license that came with it, allowing them to use this thing. And so because I'd already tested this market out there, I got an agent and I got a New York publisher to pick up the Get Clients Now book, right? The full length version in the book of what I was doing. So again, instead of saying, oh, this is a proprietary process, I can't let it loose. Yeah. I turned it into a book. And now people really wanted the facilitator's kit because now there was a book. So it looked really legit because it was a book. And so people started becoming my licensed facilitators, and it grew until I had literally hundreds of them all over the world who were teaching Get Clients Now. And at one point, another light bulb went on because I was getting a lot of questions from people on, well, how do you do this right? Yeah. I'm not sure. I said, oh, well, maybe this is a training. Maybe I can do a train the trainer thing. And sure enough, people wanted to sign up for the Train the Trainer. And then after they'd been trained, they wanted a place where they could come with their questions. So I created a quarterly forum that they could come to. This is all still by telephone conference because we didn't have video platforms yet.
Yeah.
And people wanted that too. So then I started charging an annual renewal fee, right, for the license and to maintain the license. So all of a sudden, this worksheet had grown into a class, had grown into a book, and there was the facilitator's kit and the facilitators and the facilitator training. And it was more than I wanted to do by myself, even with a virtual assistant to help me. So I started allowing other licensed facilitators to deliver the facilitator training, right? So I was training the trainers to train the trainers.
Right.
And at that point, all I had to do was show up for the quarterly forums and say, "Hi, everybody. Here's the topic of the quarter. Let's talk about this today." And it was a completely sustainable business involving all of these other people who were doing the majority of the work, so that then I could go on and do other things and not worry about paying the rent every month. So
Right.
that's how I did it. That's my origin story of what became of this one little worksheet and how I expanded it again and again and again to something that by then just really had a life of its own. And of course, the knock-on effects, right? Since the book was now selling to all of these people who needed to use it with their program, the book sales really took off. So I had book royalties, but because I had what was in the business category, a best-selling book, people wanted me for interviews. And so that increased it even more. Every time I did an interview, that meant more people wanted to come and be facilitators, etc. So the whole thing fed on itself.
Yeah, that's a fantastic story. Can you give me an idea of a timeline of you developing this vision to it taking on its own life, becoming successful?
So from the worksheet to the class was just a matter of months. From the class to the facilitator's kit was about a year. From the facilitator's kit to having other people delivering the program under my umbrella, having licensed facilitators teach Get Clients Now as subcontractors to me, that was probably another year before I had, a quantity of facilitators to choose from. So I could do that. And then from doing that to saying, hey, there should really be a training here, that was probably another year.
That seems to me from conceptualizing a business to having a functioning, thriving business, that seems like, rocket fast. I mean,
Yeah.
it is years, but these things take time. And it's very impressive that you came up with this idea, you followed through with it, and then saw it through to success. That's pretty amazing.
So that's an example of all of the different expansions of business that you can have off one thing that really works. In my case, it was a process, right? That became a class, that became a book, that became all of these other things. So it's not the only model, right? That people can use. So I've worked with a lot of people who are interested in doing some sort of membership or subscription-based model, which is something that really works well for processes that you wouldn't think you could really do that with it. I'll give you an example of somebody who's not a client. I'm actually her client. She's a mixed media artist. Her name is Jennifer Chamberlain. And I learned about her because I took one of her classes online. And like many, if not most artists, she had a day job. And she created her art on the side, and she sold some pieces now and then, but she didn't really enjoy the effort that it took to just sell a piece. She did like teaching other people how to do art. And she made a few attempts to teach local classes, but she was really limited by her rural location and the venues that were available to her for teaching. And the other thing was that her mixed media art style, it didn't really lend itself to a structured class where people would learn a specific thing like figure drawing or watercolor or whatever. So what she decided to do was to create an online membership where members would pay her a monthly fee to learn from her, but even more importantly, to create art together.
Mm-hmm.
So her membership is called the Sisterhood of Maker Bees. She started out with just 8 people and a fairly low fee, meeting in a private Facebook group and using Facebook Live. And I joined her group during the pandemic in 2020 when there was a lot of interest in doing fun things online.
Yeah.
But now it's well past that. And her model has continued to be really, really successful. And what the offering is we get together live on Facebook 3 times a month. And she creates a mixed media piece talking us through what she's doing the whole way. And
Mm-hmm.
then all of us go and we try and create our own version of that piece using the techniques she's taught us or using maybe a template that she's given us, branching
Mm-hmm.
off from her vision to our own individual visions. And then we share them all in the Facebook group. That's the whole membership, right? So she gets to create mixed media with a bunch of friendly people once a month. And we get to participate in this group and to learn and to have people that we do this thing with. And sometimes we work along with her during a session. Other times we're just watching and we create the thing later. So to join this group, I think Jennifer charges, don't quote me on this because I'm not sure I remember, but $35 a month or $350 a year. And she has 1,100 members.
Nice.
Do the math on that, right?
No, that's awesome. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing? So that's a great example of taking something that you wouldn't even think was scalable and is completely
For sure. Yeah.
scalable. I've seen lots of other people do this successfully with things like learn a language, cooking classes. I used to run a membership on productivity for writers, which was really a lot of fun. So it wasn't how to write, it was how to get your stuff written.
Which is a major issue for most writers.
Yeah, it's a big issue. You could do it with, yoga and meditation, right? There are just about any niche that you could think of. You could create a paid online membership out of it. So that's another great model for taking the thing you're doing bigger and expanding it to include more people.
And when you published the first edition of your book, these platforms were not even available at that time, right?
No.
Now the ecosystem of Patreon, YouTube, Twitter, podcasts, etc. It sounds like your system is adaptable from this time where the internet was not really definitely not what it is today. Now you've got all these platforms that can provide revenue stream, income, etc. And it seems like your system is adaptable to the current ecosystem, right?
Exactly. I wouldn't even call it, my system, but just the idea of expanding what you're doing to a bigger audience and leveraging your time and maximizing it so as to sustain you doing what you like to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, it's possible. I mean, I was doing it without even email, right? In the mid-90s, sometimes we would fax worksheets back and forth, right? And then we had email and phone conferences, and eventually we could get together online and do something on America Online back in the day, right?
For sure. Yeah.
And finally, more people had email, and then it was easier to exchange things. And then, it took a long time for video to really be accessible to the average person. Now, of course, we do have that, and we have all of these models like you said, Patreon, Substack, right? And the technology is something that defeats people sometimes. They think, oh, I'm not a tech person. I can't do this. But in the example I just gave you of Jennifer Chamberlain, she's using Facebook, right? She's not using any of those technologies. Now, eventually, she started using Kajabi as her platform for collecting membership fees and
Okay. Yeah, I've never
disseminating
heard of that.
materials. Kajabi. But all of the basic things that the service delivers are through Facebook. Just a private Facebook group that she approves you once you've paid your membership. Or at this point, her assistant approves you once you've paid your membership.
Very cool. All right, so I'm kind of thick. Takes me a while to figure out stuff. So, I mean, you've spent a lot of time talking about your facilitators, but I don't really have an idea what a facilitator does. Can you give us an idea, maybe some specific examples of what relationship between a facilitator and a client would be like?
So, Get Clients Now is a book. And in the book is a 28-day marketing program for professionals, consultants, and coaches based on that worksheet. And then over time, I developed other bits and pieces, handouts, illustrations, that sort of thing, to help with the process. So somebody can read the book and they can fill out their own worksheets. And then in the middle of the book, there's a day by day, what to do on day 1, day 2, day 3, through 28 days. So you can do it all by yourself. But isn't it more fun if you get together with a group of people, like a book club, and work through it together? So you have a Get Clients Now club, right?
Yeah.
So you're all peers working together. And I designed the book with that particular thing in mind. And we all know how it can be to have a peer-run club. You could have one person that dominates, or people don't show up, or any of a zillion other things that can go wrong when people aren't paying a fee and they don't have any commitment because they're not paying a fee, right? It's the difference between people showing up to do something that has no expense to it and people saying, oh, I invested something in this. Plus, if you have a trained facilitator, what that person does is make sure that nobody dominates, make sure that the person in the group who is a little bit shyer than the others does speak up and calls people on their stuff. So let's say you come in and you say, well, this week I did 10 out of 10 on all of my actions and I was totally successful. Well, the facilitator can be listening to that and go, that's really very interesting. So how did you allow time for yourself to do all of those, and kind of poke holes in it a bit and say, well, okay, really it was more like 9 out of 10. Okay, I didn't really do 10 out of 10. So having a trained facilitator, you can hear when people are making stuff up. Or the other way, somebody comes in totally discouraged because they say, I didn't do anything this week. I did nothing. And the facilitator can help them realize that, well, actually, they did do something. They pulled out the book and they looked at it once a day for a week. That was something.
Sure.
And number 2, that, sometimes it takes a while to integrate these things into your routine and to see results. So you have somebody who's now encouraging you to keep it going and to stay with it. Plus, you hear how other people are struggling, and that makes you, instead of beating yourself up, right, for not being able to pull it together, you are around other people who are going, I'm struggling too. And you go, oh, okay, well, maybe this is normal. And maybe if I keep going, things will get better. So having a facilitator run the group instead of just a bunch of people get together and do it themselves can really increase the quality and the effectiveness of working through the program.
Thank you. Now, one thing I'm interested in is like, I'll say community dynamics.
Mhm.
The impression I get with the example you gave of the multimedia artist, she sounds like a lone wolf, pretty unique, someone who went out there with her vision.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know. Is there a community of artists online that she's a part of, or did she just strike out, do it on her own? And in other situations, how much of it is a community of people uh, doing their books or artwork together and feeding off of each other, or are people just going out there with their vision on their own?
Great questions. So, one thing that I know really helped Jennifer is that there's a guy named Stu McLaren, and Stu McLaren teaches people how to create paid memberships.
Hmm.
That's his whole thing. And Jennifer is a Stu McLaren student. I've taken one of Stu's classes myself, and he is great. And he has an online community. His community is also Facebook based, of people who are all already running membership groups or are trying to start membership groups. And there is a community of people who are all engaged in that have similar questions
Yeah.
and similar types of problems, and are going back to that group continually and looking for, okay, well, are any of you encountering this problem? Have you solved it? So they discuss tech platforms, and they discuss how to get members, and they discuss
Yeah.
issues, and they ask for feedback like, okay, I launched my membership last week and nobody signed up. Can you guys take a look and tell me if you see anything I'm doing wrong?
Yeah.
That kind of question. So I know that that's one of the communities that Jennifer in particular is part of. I don't know if there's a group of artists online. There might
Yeah.
be.
Yeah. I remember once back in the 90s, when I lived in New Mexico, there was a pretty good writers conference, the Southwest Writers Group. They have a pretty big conference once a year, got to meet some cool writers. And the big attraction was to get to have a private meeting with an editor. And like I had, a pitch session with an editor from Bantam once. So that was a very exciting point. And one year I went and I got an email or a letter said the person you scheduled a meeting with, it can't come. So we recommend you schedule a meeting with this guy. He was a PR person. And so I said, okay. I went and met with him, and we didn't really have anything to say to each other. He's like, well, I recommend you move to LA. And I mean, I didn't have anything to promote. I just had the interview with the guy. And he was very LA, very professional, very slick and everything. And I was like, well, I don't have a published book for you to promote. And so the meeting was, not that useful. But I mean, is this still a thing? Are there PR people like that still out there? Do people hire them?
Absolutely, there are.
Yeah.
Yes. And there are a lot of people that you can hire individually, particularly around a book, because that's a very known thing. But
Yeah.
in general, if you have something like, let's say, a paid membership or a facilitator's program, what you're doing is probably not PR. It's probably the broader picture of marketing.
Right.
So an email list, right? That
Yeah.
you're constantly working, and free stuff that you invite people to periodically, a blog that you're posting to.
Yeah.
For the facilitators program in particular, once a quarter, I used to do a free preview. So Zoom conference, you come, you're interested in becoming a facilitator, you learn how it works. You hear all the ins and outs of it. You get to meet me and see that I'm a real person, and at least one of my other facilitators, and see that here's somebody else who's had positive experience with the thing. And it gives you the confidence. And then, of course, some special offer at the end, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So those types of opportunities is what really draws people in. Same thing with a membership. What Jennifer does is she periodically offers free classes. at a pretty low price, like let's
Mm-hmm.
say $15, something like that,
Yeah.
to draw people in. Again, Facebook based. So there isn't a tech barrier for most people. And you can just get to experience her and her teaching style and see if this is something that you'd like to be part of. And a lot of us who are already members always come to those things because they're fun. And we
Yeah.
get to come for free because we're members. So she has this base of people participating who are already her fans, which
Yeah.
really helps keep the enthusiasm up so that people who are new go, oh,
Yeah.
wow, this isn't just about learning art. This is a community too.
Nice. Yeah. I'm thinking about how, um, over, from the 1990s till now, the technology has changed so much, but also the economy has gone up and down. And talking to successful independent creators, they will comment on how, oh, a few years ago, I would get, X number of people buying my comic book. But then when the economy went down, my sales went down. And I can imagine, I mean, the way the economy was in the 90s, I mean, it was going gangbusters. And then, of course, I mean, there was a crash around 2000, I think, and then a
Mhm.
super big crash 2008. And have
Right.
you seen these economic trends affecting um, creative people?
It depends on what the nature of the crash is and what the nature of your thing is. So, what I found with the Get Clients Now empire basically was
Hmm.
that when the economy was good, sales were good. When the economy was bad, sales were good because everybody needed more clients.
Sure, sure. Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
the only thing that I
Hmm.
found that really affected it dramatically was right after 9/11. There was a big dip
Yeah,
because people weren't focused on business at all. Um, that was the only time I
yeah.
really noticed the
Hmm.
economic conditions or the conditions outside really
Yeah,
impacting things. But that's for that particular niche. You know, for Jennifer's example with the Sisterhood of Maker Bees, she had a huge boom in 2020. And yes, indeed, after we were all able to leave our homes and go back out in the world, her membership dropped off. She had over 2,000 people during the pandemic, and it's dropped back. But the 1,100 now seems pretty steady since
yeah.
then. And that's certainly a more than sustainable number.
Oh,
I think that's the
absolutely.
thing. I think that's the thing we forget sometimes, you know, when you're talking about being an individual creator, you don't need that much, right? You don't need to be Coca-Cola, right? You don't need to be Apple. You don't need that many clients, that many members, that many buyers to be a sustainable thing, as long as it's not sucking the soul out of you every day because you're having to put in so many hours just to do it one on one or to sell your thing by going to a show and putting it out on the table, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if you think beyond that to begin with, to, okay, what else could be possible with my creation? I think that there's some real possibility there for most of us in getting out of that endless loop of more hours or more copies. Another example, you know, with something that you might not think of as being even a candidate for this would be a game. Let's say you
Hmm.
invent a game. So I've actually seen multiple expansion paths that began with a game.
Yeah.
You may have heard of Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Hmm.
What a lot of people don't know is that his first product was a game called Cash Flow.
Yeah.
And it was designed to teach people strategies for income generation.
Yeah.
And he actually wrote the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, to expand interest in his game. And he parlayed that game plus the book
Yeah.
into an entire empire of a book series and cash flow game clubs around the country and an academy of seminars. And after the first little bit, it wasn't him teaching the seminars and it wasn't him writing the books either.
Yeah.
He stepped away from that.
Yeah. Respect the hustle.
Right. Another example of a game-based business would be Friday night at the ER. Friday night at the emergency room. It was still is. It was a game for team building and teaching systems thinking. It came on the market right about the time that I was getting started as a business coach. The main audience is corporations, and the basic game kit costs about $3,500 and up, depending on the number of players that you want to use the game with. And then they offer a facilitator training for the game, which is not required, but you might want to have a facilitator in your corporation trained to do this. And that has a price tag of around $500. So you can see how those numbers can add up pretty quickly, right? One game kit for a group of 12 people sells for $3,500.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to have too many clients for that to work. And that has been going since 1992. Still a going concern, still a popular thing that people get the game, bring it into their company. Yeah. So just so I don't give the impression that a game has to be based on something like investing or business. Another example would be Rhonda Anstead's My Career Design Studio. So Rhonda had a career development methodology that she used very largely with people who wanted to do some sort of social justice or economic development work. So Peace Corps people who were leaving the Corps were looking for their next thing.
Yeah.
A big part of her audience. So she took the career development methodology that she was using with her individual clients, she gamified it, and she turned it into an online app.
Interesting.
So now anybody can go to My Career Design Studio and take themselves through the process. So another example of a game-based thing.
Yeah. Well, CJ, thank you. It was some great advice on finding and developing your audience, sticking with your creative endeavors, and developing them into something that can provide a revenue stream, right? Thank you for joining us on the Code Rad Show today.
Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. All right. That should do it for today.